In the late summer of 1914, the border between the Russian and Austro-Hungarian empires became a fluid, violent mess of advancing and retreating columns. As these massive armies traded blows, small farming towns like Bychawą were caught repeatedly in the path of the shifting front. Weeks into the war, the Austro-Hungarian First Army under General Viktor Denk had pushed aggressively north. But that momentum broke when a Russian counteroffensive slammed into their lines, forcing Denk to order a fighting retreat back toward the south. The withdrawal was costly. By September 5th, pursuing troops from the Russian 16th Corps overran the Austro-Hungarian rearguard, seizing Hill 269, the high ground that commanded the northern approach to Bychawą. Yielding that vantage point meant the Austrians could no longer withdraw safely. With the Russian troops now looking down directly at their backs, the retreating forces turned to face their pursuers, preparing a defensive line they intended to hold to the last bullet. To build this defense, Austrian commanders utilized the local geography. As you can see on this map, the boggy, marshy banks of the Kosarzewka River formed a natural moat that restricted any infantry trying to cross the valley. Behind that river rose the steep slopes of the Białej Góry ridge. Carved into that high ground, the Austrians constructed 3 distinct tiers of trenches. This cascading layout allowed 3 rows of riflemen to fire into the valley simultaneously, without hitting the men in front of them. These trenches were reinforced with heavy sandbag revetments and wooden supports. Crucially, the engineers integrated thick, industrialized steel shooting shields into the earthworks, providing the defenders with cover that small arms fire could not penetrate. Into this fortress, the High Command placed a cohesive Hungarian infantry regiment from the 33rd Division. These men were veterans of the opening campaign, well-drilled and positioned to break the Russian pursuit. A marshland moat, a steep elevation, and armored firing positions. This arrangement forced any advancing infantry into a tiered field of fire, with no cover and no way to bypass the ridge. At 7 a.m. on September 6th, the Russian command launched their attack. Massed infantry surged forward through the morning mist, aiming to crush the Austrian line through sheer numbers. For 3 hours, the fighting was dominated by close-quarters combat. Men fought house to house and barn to barn in the muddy fields below the ridge, taking heavy casualties for every yard of ground. By 10 a.m., the Russian 164th and 332nd regiments secured their initial objectives, successfully storming the Wanzin farm and clearing the town of Bychawą. The surviving elements of the Austrian vanguard fell back from the burning town, retreating across the river and up into their primary trench network on the ridge. The Russians had taken the town, but they had advanced into the center of a trap. Their morning victory placed them exactly at the foot of the Austro-Hungarian stronghold. At 1 p.m., the Russian commanders issued the order for a frontal infantry charge directly across the river and up the slopes of Białej Góry. As the soldiers broke from the tree line and began the climb, they were totally exposed. The upward slope of the ridge offered no physical cover to shield them from the heights. To support the charge, 32 Russian artillery guns positioned to the north opened fire, but they lacked the precision to destroy the deeply dug Austrian earthworks, leaving the armored trenches intact. The Hungarian defenders waited until the Russian ranks were fully exposed on the slope. Then, safely positioned behind their steel plates, they unleashed a crossfire of machine gun and rifle rounds that swept back and forth across the open ground. The volume of incoming fire shredded the advancing lines. Unable to move forward or retreat safely, the surviving Russian infantry threw themselves into abandoned, shallow ditches near the bottom of the hill just to survive the onslaught. The massed infantry charge had met the reality of the machine gun. Flesh and bone simply could not overcome deeply entrenched soldiers firing from behind steel armor. As the sun set over the Lublin province, the roar of the machine guns faded into a tense, uneasy silence across the ridge. Up in the tiered earthworks, the mood was triumphant. The Hungarian infantrymen congratulated each other, having broken a major Russian assault while sustained by their fortifications. Down in the dark, muddy ditches below, the reality was different. Surviving Russian officers sent runners into the rear, calling for doctors and medics to manage a catastrophic number of bleeding, shattered men. By nightfall, the ridge had become a sheer wall between two worlds, the secure victors on the heights and the fragmented survivors in the mud. In 1914, successfully holding a position now meant maintaining this level of lopsided slaughter. Within days, the active front line moved on as the campaign shifted, but the battle left physical and emotional scars on the town of Bychawą that would last for generations. Historical accounts detail how, for decades after the empires collapsed, local children would wander the quiet agricultural fields of the Białej Góry ridge. Walking along the old trench lines, they regularly filled their packets with heavy lead shrapnel balls that still littered the topsoil. With no memory of the massacre, the children used the scattered ammunition to play games in the dirt. The earth eventually swallowed the trenches, and the steel shields rusted away. But the fact that the tools of an industrialized massacre became the playthings of a new generation remains the most haunting legacy of the ridge at Bychawą.